Hi, welcome to another episode of the Hummingbird Chronicles podcast. My name is Julie Renton. I'm actually really excited about this episode for a few reasons. First, I had Paul, my really good friend Paul. He was able to co-host, sit in on this interview with me. And second, our guest is just someone that I've really been meaning to talk to and get to know a little better. And so his name is Hector Ruíz. He is an attorney. He was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. He is currently working out of Dallas, Texas, but he still does a lot of work here in El Paso as well, part-time. And I wanted to speak with him because, like I mentioned, he's an attorney and he focuses on immigration law, specifically around humanitarian immigration. Hector also has a very special personal interest in representing and providing help for members of the LGBTQIA plus community. And he's actually done very important work at the U.S-México border with trans folks. So I'm not going to keep you all waiting anymore. This was a fun interview for me. It was really good to get to know, like I said, a little bit about him. And I hope that you all enjoy. I was about to tell him how Sunday that I saw you, you were like, oh, the way we met. And then you laughed and you said, no, I'm going to save it for Sunday. I mean, for the recording.
Oh, yeah, the way Hector and I met.
Because we're sitting here trying to figure out how we came into each other's orbit. And
Right.
we have no clue, neither one of us. In fact, I didn't even know you knew him until way later.
Yeah, because I remember you telling me when we did the last episode, Hector told me, he's like, hey, just wanted to check on you. And he told me, like, he had listened to the episode. I was like, oh, shoot. Like, I thought that was really cool. I thought that was just really nice of him to have reached out. But you don't know how you all met?
We don't know.
Dude, I don't know how I met you either, also. We were just concluding that
it's a small world and everybody knows everybody.
We started talking through social media, and then we would talk to each other through WhatsApp. And I remember I was in this apartment, and the stairs were very steep. The stairs were very steep.
I remember that.
Yeah, because it was like it was a little townhome. It was like a little 2-story townhome. And I had showered, like I had my towel around me or whatever, and I was walking, but steps were really slippery, and I slipped from like the 5th step. I still have the scar, like I have a giant scar on my leg because I hit myself, and I literally was like this close to like almost breaking my neck. And I hurt myself at work earlier, so like I had hurt one of my wrists, I can't remember which one. And then I hurt my leg, so I literally couldn't move. And luckily my phone was right there, and I called my dad, I called my mom. Of course, they didn't answer because God forbid they ever answer their phone.
Because parents never answer.
And I messaged Hector, and it was like something out of one of those commercials you see on TV where I was like, I've fallen and I can't get up. Like literally, I've fallen and I can't get up. I text those actual words, I've fallen and I can't get up. So he was like, do you need help? I was like, if you could, please. Like I literally could not get up. He had to help me. Like, I mean, luckily I had my towel around me, but I was like laying on the kitchen floor. He comes over and like opens the door. Thankfully it wasn't locked. He helped me get up the stairs. I was literally like, I would have had to have yelled like so bloody murder for someone to have heard me. Like otherwise, I would have just stayed down in the kitchen. Like I was like laying on the floor of my kitchen in my apartment. It was crazy. Yeah, I know. I was like, I literally like.
Yes, that's.
No, I remember that now. I lived down the street. It was no problem at all.
He was like, it's not a big deal. I was like, no, thank you. Like, thank you. Like because of you, I thought I was gonna. It was like one of those things where like I would have died. I literally would have slept on my kitchen floor or like been yelling for my neighbors.
That's where I found him.
On the floor.
On the kitchen floor. Both feet out.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was sweet. Of course, Hector and I have never met. We were trying to figure that out right now. We couldn't figure out. Neither one of us know how in the heck I think I might have requested him on Facebook. I just started to see all the stuff that you share because you are an attorney, correct?
Yes, I focus on immigration law and specifically on humanitarian immigration. So I do a lot of asylum work. And I guess when we met, I was still on the border doing asylum work, at Juárez border.
I did want to ask you, Hector, because I think even though we don't remember like how we met or how we even came up to know each other in the beginning, I do have a very vivid memory of when I really started to focus on the work you were doing, which was with aiding and facilitating, help of any kind at the time for asylum seekers, specifically transgender women, which is important because not a lot of people are willing to go the extra mile to help, especially not only like asylum seekers, immigrants, but then transgender LGBTQ individuals. Like, it seems to me like that's kind of almost like forgotten for a lot of people. And I know that like detention centers, ICE detention centers are pretty harmful for anybody. Like, I mean, the abuse that goes on there is like horrible. But then I know that I was reading that like the abuse that goes on and the care or lack of that transgender women experience is just like really, really scary. So I can see why you would feel the need to really step in and try to do your part.
When I first graduated from law school, my first job was at this organization in New York called Immigration Equality, where we focused on representing LGBTQ immigrants and asylum seekers. And so, that's where I learned how this field sort of specialized, to serve that particular population. To me, of course, it was the perfect marriage of all of the reasons why I went to law school, and also my own intersectional identities, including being a member of the LGBTQ community as well. I think you're totally right that I think there isn't such a sort of widespread recognition of the need for these specialized services. But as you were just highlighting, there are special needs and there are sort of particular experiences that the community faces beyond what any other, immigrant or asylum seeker would face through the asylum seeking system or, seeking any sort of immigration benefit. And also through the detention system that we have in this country.
I was reading that technically transgender women are not supposed to be now detained with men, because that was done up until recently, right? Like they wouldn't recognize that they identified as female, and they were like, no, to us, you're this, and therefore you go here. Now, I know they're not supposed to do that, but I guess they're still doing it, and I don't know what's going on with that or what's being done about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, since detention sort of exists, I think they have just housed transgender women in the same spaces as cisgender men. There has been a history of, I guess, the government's attempt to house trans folks in separate housing, but it's been applied inconsistently, even with the existence of those specialized detention spaces, which of course, like trans women, nobody should be in detention for a civil proceeding, right? But especially, as you mentioned, transgender women who are just acutely vulnerable for many reasons. There have been several iterations of those, like what the government, or I guess would have colloquially been called transgender pods. There was one in Santa Ana before organizers in the area shut that down. And then there was one in New Mexico, actually. And that's how I got involved with the work at the southern border through my previous employer that was based right out of Santa Fe. The shelter was the detention center was like right outside of Santa Fe. And that's how, my previous employer became sort of the de facto service provider for that particular community. And then I think in the middle of the pandemic, they moved the trans community from that trans pod in quotes, and then to other detention facilities to specialized places. So I guess that's all reflective of an effort, from the government. I don't know if it's just, lip service type of effort or like, just really superficial.
Like, let's shut these people up.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, historically, even with the existence of those spaces, there have been people, a lot of our clients have been detained in rural detention centers, and I think that's also maybe another conversation, but that's also, intentional on the government's behalf to like house certain, to house people or detain people in just like rural places where there's just no service, or like legal service or access to, representation. But I think right now, because of so many shifts in policy, and obviously, Title 42 being in place and keeping most people out, I think the detention numbers have gone down significantly. Although I do think it's been a while since I've been in a meeting with, representatives from the government, like from headquarters, ICE headquarters. But they, the last time we had a conversation with them, there was a handful of trans immigrants and asylum seekers in detention, and they were anywhere in the country at any given point.
Just to interject, for anybody who doesn't know, Title 42 was a Trump-era piece of legislation that was, if I'm not mistaken, that would ban anybody coming to the United States seeking asylum. And it's still a piece of legislation that Joe Biden has not struck down and has continued to implement.
I think it sends them back, right?
Right. So yeah. So it's Title 42. Yeah. It's a public health section of the law, or I'm not really sure which instrument it's found in. It's a section of the law that basically allows the government to deny entry into the United States to anybody on the basis of a public health emergency, but the government, as Paul mentioned, the Trump administration weaponized that law to keep asylum seekers out of the country. Like, that's not the intention of Title 42 at all, but they used it.
It was like a loophole.
Yeah, to enforce immigration, or to do whatever they wanted with the immigration system. And so
it was a veil, for them to be like, oh, look, we're doing this in the safety of the people of the United States of America, and it's not at all what it was.
Right. And as Paul mentioned, the Biden administration has not lifted it. It's still in place, although, there are announcements right now. There were recent announcements, actually, that it was going to be lifted at the end of May, but then pretty sizable group of states sued the federal government to stop that lifting of Title 42. And there was a federal judge who actually granted a temporary restraining order on the lifting of Title 42. So for now, that plan for it to be lifted is paused. So that does, lead to people remaining in Mexico who would otherwise have access to the asylum seeking system.
Yeah. Now, I read that you, in fact, actually did make it out to Mexico, right? Was it Juarez, like on the Juarez side of Mexico, that you went and traveled with the work that you were doing at the time? I'm assuming this is around 2018, 2019, around there?
I actually traveled to Mexico City to meet with the caravana, the migration caravan that was, making its way through Mexico at the time. So as I mentioned, my organization, so it's called Santa Fe Dreamers Project, and because of its unique geographical position next to the transpod at the time, we sort of had like a pretty well-oiled machine in terms of when trans asylum seekers got to the transpod, we had a streamlined way to get folks out as soon as possible. And so our intention with my going to Mexico City was to start getting the information, start preparing the documentation, start reaching out to sponsors in the United States, so that when they did make it into the, to the border and were transferred to, presumably, right, to the detention center, we would have all that ready so as to minimize their time spent in detention.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. It was just sort of facilitating it all. And then it was hopefully shortening the time that they had to be detained. But then I read that one of the times, I don't know if this happened in this particular time or another time, but that you were actually thoroughly investigated on your way back. They went through your phone and all. Was that because they knew who you were attached to at the time, the kind of work you were doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wasn't it national news?
I was one of several advocates and a handful of lawyers who were stopped and sent to secondary for deeper inspection. And that experience, it was 2 a.m, full disclosure, I was coming back from Juarez from hanging out with friends, having a good time. And I'm coming back and they just I guess they had my profile flagged, so they sent me to secondary, and then they held me for a good 4 hours actually while they called. I don't know the exact term, but it's a terrorism tactical unit, an investigative branch related to terrorism from Homeland Security investigations. So it was they dragged those people out of bed at 2 a.m. to come and interrogate me about my involvement with supporting the asylum seeker caravan, there were accusations that we were coaching people to say the right things so as to get through the system, and alleged linkages to Antifa, and just anything that the Trump administration could throw at us just to
like
stop
those trigger words.
Radical.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely
It was national news, right? I remember you said it was national news. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong.
I read it. Yeah, I read it. Like,
right,
I mean,
exactly.
I think it's like independent, but throughout the nation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no clue this happened to him.
So people stop you like, oh my God, are you that guy that got detained?
Can I have your autograph?
Autograph?
Surely, ma'am. Yes, you can.
We're laughing about it now, but that must have been really
no.
scary.
Yeah, like of course when you're going through it, because you never know if they wanted to really make it seem, and pin something that very well could have happened. I mean, you're talking about the government. Yeah, like you never know, You mentioned something a little while ago about going to Mexico and like meeting with the caravan, people that were like traveling in the caravan. What do you say? Or like, did you ever have to, because I'm sure you heard it, at the time when they were traveling. That was kind of like the thing that they were using. A lot of Trump supporters, and I'm not trying to like, talk bad about them, but those were the facts. Like every Trump supporter was sort of falling for the caravan issue as a way to say how we need to secure our borders and like this is why, and making up all these lies. What was your way of handling that, right? If those comments were ever made directly to you, or if they weren't, like when you would hear people using this as an excuse for all the horrible things that were happening at the border to immigrants and asylum seekers, how could you defend that?
Yeah, I did actually. I remember one time I don't remember where I was, but somebody's friend, or I guess their boyfriend at the time, I don't know, they were asking, yeah, like, what do you make of those people swarming the borders? And, I was like, what, like, where are they? I don't see them. Like, I don't know, like someone's feeding you some like false ideas, because like there is, people are not charging towards the border in ways that the conservatives think. So that was one of them. And then, other than that, I think I always go back to, the same answer, which is that like people are exercising their human right, like not only their human right, but also their recognized right under international law, but also our own laws. Like Congress enacted laws to protect these people and a process for them to access, that right.
People seeking amnesty.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, so if you have a problem with that, take it up with Congress. Like that's
I'm not Congress, right?
Yeah. Well, now the issue is that people from Ukraine are able to seek asylum here, but people from Latin American countries aren't. I was telling Julie, Hector, the other a few weeks ago, it's been like 3 weeks ago or so. I was block walking, collecting signatures for Justicia from Teresa, and this one lady was kind of sketchy at first. Was kind of wary of what I was doing. I explained to her what we're trying to do, and then she, out of the blue, asked me, "What do you think about immigrants, about immigration?" And I told her I believe there should be a pathway to citizenship. And she's like, I think there should, but only for the Ukrainians, not for people from Latin American countries. I looked at her and I was like, why is that? I'm like, is that because they're light skinned and have blue eyes? And she said, well, they're escaping war. Like what they're escaping is I'm like, these people from Latin America. I told her, I was like, please do me a favor. We can't get into a debate right now, but I told her, please, when I leave YouTube, the Latin American dirty wars, because you will find that it has been the United States government policies that have made the living conditions in these Latin American countries unlivable. I told her, I was like, imagine, put yourself in their place and imagine what it would take, the dire circumstances it would take for you to tell your children and your whole family one night, pack all your things because in the morning or tonight, we're leaving.
You leave everything behind.
You leave everything behind. To me, people think it's like, oh, like these people are just like, why? If it's such a dangerous journey, why even risk it? Clearly, the conditions are so dire and horrible that they can't. That's the best option that they see.
Yeah,
I find people are just so completely uneducated when it comes to what our government is responsible for. we're lighting their house on fire, and then not even like we're trying to keep them in the house that we've lit on fire, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's a conversation that not a lot of people are willing to have, because it requires that you take a hard look at the country we live in and acknowledge how much of that the country has cost, and the previous leaders and even current leaders. And it's tough. It's like anything else. Anytime anybody's like, well, your life's crap because of the choices you've made, we don't want to hear that, right? So obviously we don't want to take a hard look. We just want to like turn a blind eye and
Zero
be like,
introspection. There's zero introspection when it comes to our government and the media.
yeah, like we want to put the blame on them. But I do think it's really sad. And I do remember that conversation with Paul, because I think 10,000 Ukrainians have either, if they're about to be granted citizenship or have applied and they're in the works of getting it. I don't want to like quote myself on this because I don't remember, but I know that the number was 10,000. I just don't remember like the details around it. And a lot of people agree with this, which, listen, I think it's horrible what's happening in Ukraine. Do I think that we should be allowing people to come because they're escaping something that is being done to them? Absolutely. And I told you, Paul, I have nothing against that. Keep doing what you're doing for Ukrainians. But why is it being done so fast without anybody complaining, and everybody's being overly understanding about their situation, which they should, because it is, like I said, a horrible situation. But nobody's like blinking twice about it. Nobody's like saying, well, wait a minute, we don't have the money or the resources. Nobody's saying that, because they're looking at the humane side of it. To them, it's horrible. They should be allowed to come. Why can't we do that with people of color who are and have been continuously running away from situations like that?
Right. Certainly Central Americans, but also even, with Afghan folks.
Yeah.
We go and destabilize entire regions of countries, literally several countries in an entire region throughout the world. And then whenever they're seeking the asylum from the conditions we've created, we are like, oh, what are you doing? No, don't come over here. And it's just the hypocrisy and the double standard of it all is really sickening to me to watch.
Which, you know what? And I want to ask you this, Hector, because with hearing just a little bit, I mean, because this is literally just touching a little tiny bit of what you've done and what you've learned and what you've seen. Do you ever wake up and think, I have to keep doing this for this same reason? Or do you have more moments of disillusion now?
Are you more cynical?
Yeah, like this is not going to change, or I don't know. What was I thinking when I first started out doing this? Do you question that?
No, I don't think I question it. I think I'm a lot more realistic about the need versus the capacity of people doing this work. The need is always going to be much greater. The desperation is always going to be there. And so yeah, when I wake up and, continue doing this work, I kind of see it as like, in a way, it's a duty. Like, I'm just going to wake up and keep doing it because that's what I do. And that's what I'm passionate about. And I think I consider myself very fortunate to have found something that I'm really passionate about, that I can make, it sounds weird to say make a living, but it like to sustain my living while I can dedicate myself to this cause. So, but yeah, at the same time, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way in terms of stretching myself too thin, trying to help everybody, those sorts of things. I still feel, with the experience that I have, I feel empowered and I know that I can do a lot, but in comparison to the need, it doesn't even scratch the surface. And I just have to keep that in mind and in perspective. But yeah, definitely what I can do, I definitely put my entire self into it, and just, until, I guess, also keeping in mind my own sort of limitations. And
and I think that you said something that I think is what matters, because so many people go or set themselves up to do work that they feel, it's like meaningful and you're doing something for others. But I feel like when it's not their passion and it's not something that truly moves them, the fire probably goes out a lot quicker. And then they're like, I'm done with this, right? Because a lot of people really do, the money aspect of it comes first, and like the stability of a job. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Like, whatever. Like, you got to survive and you got to, do that. But I think that that's probably what's made the difference for you, is that it is a passion of yours.
Yeah, I think earlier on I identified, I didn't always grow up thinking this is what I want to do. It's just sort of, it's been the result of life experiences. And I didn't always know I wanted to be a lawyer. I think, graduated from high school, I knew I wanted to go to college. And that was as far, I think, I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know what the heck was going to be of me after high school, right?
Yeah.
I started out as a biology major, I think, just because, everybody wanted to become a doctor.
Right. Yeah.
I think I wanted to be like a microbiologist or something. But then, in college, I started taking courses that related more to sociology and psychology and just more like human facing fields. And I discovered a passion in that. And I think, not to shit on the public education system, but those were things that I was not exposed to. Those were things I was not exposed to when I was, it was always, math and science and blah, blah, blah. And our social
all
studies
the things
classes.
You don't need to know.
Prep for the SAT. Yeah.
Exactly. So my social studies teachers, I hope they're not hearing this. They were not the best.
You did the best you could.
But it wasn't until college where I was like, oh, wow, there's all these issues. And then I had the opportunity to go abroad my first year of college, actually. It was a summer. And I went to France, actually. And I remember they had I guess, I don't know if y'all know, but France is known for strikes. They'll strike everything all the time. So public transit, their high speed trains are always, on strike. And so when I was there, I got to witness a strike. And I was like, oh, wow, this is a really unique sort of powerful way for people to take back the, that power that they have to make things work if they're not happy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, okay, people can really take these matters into their own hands and make a huge difference. So that's when I started learning about sort of revolutionary movements. I started learning about May 1968, the whole flower power movement.
And then that was it, right? You were like, that's it.
Yeah, I was like, wow, yeah, people taking their matters into their own hands. How cool.
When people used to actually take to the streets and actually stand up for what was right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, around that time, I was like, screw biology. I'm going to do something else. I think I always knew I was interested in international stuff too, but I didn't know how to focus that, yet. But I made a decision to study some variation of international relations. As I started studying, I think I hadn't even started. I was about to. The violence in Mexico started scaling up, northern Mexico. And I'm sure it's true for a lot of people in our community, but the violence, reached certain members of my family directly. Yeah, no, I mean, it is really unfortunate. And of course, like I said, I'm sure it's not a unique experience for people in our community. But that was I remember just very specifically being I'm going to use this experience and turn that energy around and focus it into something that, maybe my family members were not able to escape this horrific, violence, but there are a bunch of people who are fleeing that same situation. And I want to see what's up, how can I help? So then I started sort of shifting my thinking into human rights and exercising people's, refugee rights and people's right to flee and seek protection in a different country. I guess that's where I started focusing, on developing that framework, I guess, for my career. And then later on, after my first job out of college, I was mentored by some really awesome Latina, now attorneys, actually, who really, helped me believe in myself enough to pursue law. Because I don't know why, I didn't believe that I could become a lawyer, but I don't know.
It's so crazy, right? Because I have talked to a lot of people within our community, the Hispanic community, and they have done amazing things, regardless of whatever path they chose for themselves. But every single one of them at some point, especially first generation, have all said to me, I didn't even think that this was ever achievable or possible for me. I could see it for everybody else, not me.
Oh, I owe it to them entirely. Totally. I started doing humanitarian immigration around that time, but then I was like, you know what? There's an even bigger issue that is asylum. I know asylum is really hard to win. Even I remember telling people I want to be an asylum lawyer, and people would be like, that's really hard. And I'd be like, all right, well, we're going to do it. And that's, again, like with my plan was to do asylum. When I decided to go to law school, I was like, I'm going to be an asylum lawyer. Like, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Yeah, I guess like I started learning about the different like focuses within asylum. And that's when I was like, you know what, like the trans and queer community really needs that special attention that is just not being given. And certainly by people, we're so underrepresented in the legal field.
What's the difference between what I know, because you and I we saw each other on Christmas or around Christmas time, but for people who want to know the difference from what you were doing here in El Paso to what you're doing now in Dallas.
Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, I feel like my mind just went everywhere trying to.
I remember, telling me about some of your experiences, like when you were working here, and I remember a couple of them being really moving. I mean, you didn't give me specifics, but you told me just like sort of like little details of certain things people were going through, and it was very humbling experience to sort of hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I've done a bit of everything at the border in El Paso. I mean, I think the border really is like the ground zero for a lot of these like novel policies, and it definitely was for 2018, the zero tolerance family separation stuff. So anyway, I did a lot of direct representation in El Paso on both sides of the border, going to detention centers and spending hours on end interviewing clients to prepare their applications and going to the immigration courts and litigating their cases. Did a lot of that. I'm trying to contextualize this a little better because I think in El Paso, like the dynamics are different. Like those cases are super quick. Like technically folks are subject to what's called expedited removal, which means that their cases are just moving so quickly and they have to pass it's an interview basically to get them out of that expedited removal and into normal proceedings to, present their asylum claim or their claim for protection in the country. So it's a lot of that. And in the interior where I'm, in Dallas, which is considered the interior, our clients have already passed that process. Like they've had the interview, they're no longer in that speedy proceeding. They're in the normal process and they're able to present their case in front of the judge. Con calma, right? In quotes también.
Yeah.
But those cases can take years, many, many years. And for the most part, asylum seekers that are in the interior are already released from detention. So a lot of my clients here in Dallas are released. But I also have detained clients out here in Dallas, but the detention scheme in the interior works a little bit differently in that at the border, because asylum seekers are technically subject to mandatory detention, like a lot of them are, detained when they enter the country, even though they have no criminal history or whatever. In the interior, most immigrants who are in detention, or a good majority, I would say, is because they have had a brush with the criminal justice system and they have some, criminal convictions that landed them or criminal accusations.
And that's how they were identified through. Okay.
Exactly. So the cases are a little different in that regard. Sometimes more complicated, although there's complicated cases in different.
Is there a difference in the volume of the clients you do get now compared to before being here on the border?
Not the volume, but I think the sense of urgency and desperation.
Right.
The volume is always there. There's always a huge need.
Would you say that maybe like where you are right now in Dallas, it doesn't feel as desperate because maybe in some way they've already kind of have a life maybe started, going family, and they kind of have a better idea of, I guess, a routine versus here at the border. It's like, where do we go? What do we do? This is all brand new.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a big part. Although I will say that this week we received a family from Venezuela, actually, that had just been relieved from the government. And they didn't have a place to go in the United States. And the government put our office address there because they knew that they were coming to Dallas. So they came to our office and they're like, we don't have anywhere to live. So sometimes we see that too. And it's like, okay, that's, a little bit of the taste of what's going on at the border every day.
Yeah, which probably helps, right? Having work.
Yeah, totally.
I kind of want to, if Paul, after he asks whatever he has to ask, I want to turn this to a little bit more about, your life and outside of work. But I feel like Paul's wheels are like, and I want to hear
Of course, they're always going. again, you and I talked about this on Christmas, around Christmas. The disconnect from people in the Dallas area that are doing this kind of work as opposed to the people here on La Frontera, like obviously there's a huge disconnect because they don't know. Their parents or grandparents are not like first generation, immigrants or anything, so I'm guessing there's a huge disconnect with the work that they sort of do that you all are doing in Dallas right now.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a unique thing for somebody to understand the dynamics of the border. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I see that as an asset where I am, like in the jobs that I've held here in Dallas, like I definitely am able to step in and be like, well, this is because this happened at the border and this happened and that's why this is happening now. Yeah, I think people... it's not even that far from the border, but people just don't experience the border as regularly. Like they don't see the dynamic.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Which is probably why a lot of people, especially white people, who don't have, because a lot of them say, our parents are immigrants from like Italy, Europe, or whatever. And I don't care what anybody says, it is not the same thing. The experiences of them coming here will never be the same as, like, for instance, my parents coming from Mexico and then us not having been born here, because me and one of my sisters were not born here. And then, we came older, like 10, 11, having come from experiencing life in Mexico and then now having to like assimilate here, like it's whoa, so they're never going to understand that. And I think to what Paul was saying is that's why it's so easy for white people who don't understand our experiences that don't live in a border city be like, oh no, their government needs to fix that, or that's not our problem, because white people that have had at least the experience of living in a border town, having friendships with immigrants, perhaps maybe even people join their family, right, from like that are immigrants, they tend to see that like on a personal level and understand it better. But anybody else, like you can't. If you don't have that background, if you haven't lived in a border city, they can't possibly understand it.
Yeah, and I've been surprised, like, throughout my life, I've had people who just really misunderstand the borders so much, like, and it shows in ways like, I remember I had a friend who would not visit El Paso because he thought he needed a passport. And it's like, okay, do you really not know that? What? Like,
yeah. That's a first. Oh my God. Paul said, how cute.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like people, and maybe it's fear of like the closeness to a different country of Mexico. I don't understand.
It's the stigma too.
We're nothing but rapists and murderers here and drug dealers. Hello.
Yeah, like the cartel like runs the streets, and it's all through the whatever the media puts out there.
There's some truth to all of that, but I won't say there isn't. But I guess it's not like you're just gonna get close to the border and all that shit's gonna come and attack you.
Yeah, like you're gonna be a prisoner of some war here.
There's a giant wall, in case you all didn't know.
Oh my gosh, but no. Just to go back now to get a little bit more about, because now we know the work you do, which is phenomenal. I really think that there's not a lot of people. There's people that do the kind of work you do, but I don't think, like I said, there's people who are truly driven by passion to do this kind of work. So I personally appreciate that so much. But then you you grew up here in El Paso.
Born and raised. Uh-huh.
And then family, like your parents, you have siblings.
Yeah, my parents are from Juarez. They came to the U.S. in the 70s and established a family and a home. I have 3 older sisters, so I'm the baby. My mom and my 2 oldest sisters still live in El Paso, and then I have a sister who lives in New York City.
You've traveled outside of El Paso often throughout your life for work and school and stuff. But do you? Because Paul and I, when we were recording this past weekend, we were talking about that, about how I think for a long time, I know it happened to me, like people would crap so much on El Paso. Like even your own friends, like, oh, you got to get out of here. There's nothing to do here. There's no future for you here. And so I think for a while that kind of influenced me, like, oh my gosh, yeah, like what am I doing here? I need to get out of here. And then I did. I left. And then I came back. And it wasn't until I came back that I realized how unique it is to live here. right? It's like a whole different world.
That was my experience too. I think, when I was in high school and 18 or 17 going on 18, I couldn't wait to leave El Paso and experience something different, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also, personally, I went to a small ass town that was like just terrible.
It was downgrading.
Yeah, exactly. This is not the worldly experience I was hoping for college. No. And obviously, every chance I got, I would go back to El Paso.
Yeah, right.
Because it was like, there's El Paso and there's Juarez, there's all these cultures. Like, yes, it's all, there's a lot of the same.
There's Las Cruces.
Yes.
But yeah,
Just kidding. I'm just being stupid. I'm totally just being stupid.
And then, I think throughout the years, it was like, I started, like, as you said, like really like starting to realize how unique El Paso was and how unique it was to be from the border and have that perspective. Like I couldn't shut up. I still can't shut up about El Paso. I talk about it.
We're the second largest international border town. People don't realize that. I've been bringing that up to people. Like when I talk to people about politics, when people are like, why do you guys care about the money here in El Paso? There's not that much money here in El Paso. I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Literally the second largest international border town in the world. The first one is Tijuana and San Diego.
Yeah.
And so people need to realize there's a lot that goes on here.
And there's so much to offer just even in terms of like community, because throughout like every podcast that I've had, especially when people from El Paso come on, I love hearing their experience and how they feel in comparison to what I feel about El Paso, which is I went as far as Alaska. Like we went to Alaska. We were there for 5 years. And I just could never find that feeling of like belonging.
Right.
Yeah. And it's so weird because all you ever wanted to do when I was young was like, oh, I'm different. I'm not like everybody here, blah, 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 blah. But then you leave and you're like, oh, but I was like them and I don't mind it.
The community, that sense of community.
Yeah.
And I think, from what I've heard from other people who've experienced El Paso or met people from El Paso, everyone always says, oh, you El Pasoans are just so nice. And it's always been such nice people and welcoming. And it's like, yeah, that's who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, we really are. Right, Paul? Yeah.
I just got done block walking and talking to people on YouTube earlier. You don't want to hear my opinion right now. You really don't.
I mean, we know how to...
No, I'm kidding. For all like what always keeps me going, even in the rough times, like when I deal with people who are maybe who are more reluctant to want to participate or like help out with what we're doing. For every one of those, there's another like 2 or 3 that are like super supportive and helpful. So I mean, it's a very nice feeling because there are people that care, and it's just a matter of I was just being facetious.
I think I really do see El Paso as just being warm and. There's just that like culture of, generally, I think you're right that there are people who, as with anywhere else.
Exactly. And this is home.
It is. Home. And I think at the core, when you talk about the people that make up El Paso, where you grew up and your friends that till this day, I have like friends that I still talk to, from when I was young here. Like, I just don't think that anything compares to that, really.
Yeah, there's been people like, I've had voters who've like been super sweet and like, they're like, do you want some water? They offer like drinks when they see me block walking. And I think it's the sweetest thing. Every time I'm always like, it hurts. I mean, in a good way. It's like, it's a very touching sort of feeling.
Yeah.
It's like, that's cool. People looking out for one another. I mean, that's what community
Somos
is
gente.
about, obviously.
But and then I wanted to ask you something that, because I feel like your job is probably very stressful as much as you love it. And like I can't even begin to.
No, that's just me. That's me projecting. That's me projecting. What if I was?
This is why I love having him on. I never know what he's gonna strike with.
I would if I had that job. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that's what he does.
Right.
This full disclaimer. That's what I would do. I'm on the mend. Yeah. I'm sober and clean. 20 months of clean time. But if I had that job, I would feel the need to like.
No, seriously, you have to find something. Yeah, no, you're right. You have to find something that, I mean, maybe not that, but but you definitely have to have something that like de-stresses you and like reboots yourself. Like, is there something that you like to do?
I feel like I've become really bad at that. I used to be really. I used to like to. I mean, I still to some extent, but I'm not as passionate. But I was into like going to the gym and like doing CrossFit and bodybuilding, según yo, just I think that has been really therapeutic, I think, in terms of like releasing a lot of stress. De vez en cuando lo que señaló Paul también, pero
Así, but we're not going to give dates.
You have, like, from when we first met, Hector, from when we first met to now, like, or when I last saw you in Christmas, I told you, I was like, oh shit, like, you weren't big to me before. You weren't like, oh, you didn't look overweight or anything, but like, you definitely lost weight. Like, so like, I mean, it's definitely shown. The work you've put into like your healthy coping skills or outlets is definitely shown. I don't know why I made that face when I said that.
I'm like, I feel like, especially with the reason I said that I've gotten bad at it is because I actually have 2 jobs now. I love the work I do at the border so much that I do it part-time now. I'm still connected to helping asylum seekers in Juarez gain exemptions from Title 42 based on vulnerabilities. I started a couple of months ago, and we've gotten around 40 people in since I started doing this work already. So
wow,
I just work a lot, but it's I try to balance that with just
that is hard. Which, and I'm gonna get personal now, and if you don't want to say it or you want me to cut it off, just that's fine. But how do you maintain like a love interest, or is that something that you're like, oh, I don't even like, there's no time for that, I don't have the energy to do that? No,
I mean, also like personal experiences have kind of turned me off to that a little bit. So I'm like, you know what, like if it happens, it happens. I'm not going to be actively looking for it. I'm perfectly fine on my own, and I'm super happy with myself. Yeah, like I don't need somebody to
weigh you down.
Yeah, or even I guess just like I feel like on a personal level, in the past, in my dating experiences, I've sort of looked to my partner to give me a sense of value.
Which you're not alone in that. I think a lot of us have done that.
I think my last experience was like, you know what, like I'm the damn prize. I'm the catch. Like
that's right. Yes. Can we put that in print and make T-shirts out of that?
You should be groveling at my feet.
I'm not going to be, like trying to measure up to somebody else when like I know the worth, like I know who the heck I am, and I don't need somebody to tell me that.
Definitely. And then like, I think also it would probably take a really special person to come into your life and understand that the work you do, not only is it your passion, but like the impact that it makes, in people's lives, and to be understanding of like the long hours and like not feeling like, you know what I mean? Like it's So if right now, if you're fine alone, like go for it. Because Paul and I were just talking about that, right? Because Paul was feeling the same thing. He's like, I have so many plans, and like the work he's doing with, Justicia Fronteriza and stuff, and so many other things that are kind of like bubbling up in his mind, like to try and like find somebody who understands that and like doesn't try to like stop me from that. That's exhausting.
I also feel like that. And then also I feel like I've put in so much work into like really understanding, like valuing myself and understanding who I am and like what I'm willing to put up with and what I'm not. And I'm just like, all of that has been work that I'm not ready or willing to let anybody in to access like the results. Yeah. Right.
And I wish somebody would have that specific conversation with people when they were younger. Energy doesn't have to go to just anybody. Your piece is your piece. Like the right person will value that without you even having to need it. Like they'll just admire and value that and they'll stay. But we don't have those conversations I have those conversations with the kids.
Good.
Nobody had them with me.
Right. What I was going to say is that like, I think the other things that I kind of just do maybe I don't actively seek out things to de-stress and all of that all the time, but I also just honor my limitations. Like if I feel tired, I don't even think twice. I'm like, I'm shutting my computer down and putting it down. Like, I do that a lot.
Yeah. And you know what? That's something else that I think in society, like the last few years kind of like ingrained in us. If you're not like going and hustling, then you're failing at life. And I really like how here recently it's sort of coming about that people are embracing a slow lifestyle. I mean, and granted, like for instance, like your type of work or like the things that Paul is doing right now, sometimes it kind of requires you to put a little more energy into your day, do more things, have a full schedule. But then also, like you said, if I feel like I should take a day off, I should take a day off if I can. And I shouldn't have to explain myself to anybody about that, So I do see a lot of younger people doing that more, honoring that a lot more. And it just makes me so happy because I spoke with someone recently and I was telling them that I see so many things wrong right now. And I get a little disillusioned and I feel like we're doomed. This is never going to change, right? But I see younger people and they're so excited about not putting up with so many things anymore. Literally putting their foot down, Because I'm in my 40s now. And I wish I could have seen, and you did have movements when I was growing up and you did have people kind of trying, but I don't think that I think maybe like with the help of social media and whatnot, it's more accessible to everybody. It was harder to find out about it when I was growing up, but I'm excited that as much as people crap on like younger people, I actually am excited about the younger people coming up. And I tell Paul this all the time, like, don't settle, do what you feel is right for you. Do what feels good in your heart and like fight for, you guys are making a difference and it makes me excited.
I totally agree. The Gen Zers are just so impressive to me. And also just, like you said, like what they're not willing to put up with, but also like that, like, yeah, their sense of empowerment to really just be their authentic selves and like, like this is who I am. And like, this whole idea of like, younger kids realizing that they may be transgender or genderqueer and all those things. Like, great. Like, I love that.
You hear all the time, like, I hate, like, one of the people that drives me crazy that's on mainstream platforms, like Bill Maher. You hear those different people that are like, oh, you younger kids are such pussies and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, first of all, look at everything that they're dealing with. Look at the world that they're growing up in. I don't know. To me, like I can't at all relate or agree with the people that think these things of the younger generation. Because you know what? Despite the odds being stacked against them, I think it's going to be these Gen Zers who will help change the world. I used to think it was millennials. I think still millennials, like there could be a good portion of millennials who might be able to help with that.
I feel like millennials sort of set the path,
the precedent.
Yeah. For them to be like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because my generation, we just kind of went with everything. And like, I'm going to tell you something.
Well, see, you guys had hot Cheetos and nacho cheese and
one of my vices was that. No, but you know what? Like, I'm actually glad that you touched on that point because I think my generation, a lot of people pride themselves in being very strong. And it's not something that I'm going to deny. We are very strong, but because we had no other choice. You know what I mean? Like it's not in a positive light. You had all these traumas going on and all these things happening to you, and you just didn't have the space to speak about it, or you didn't have the space to feel anything about it. And so you just kind of had to like literally suck it up and drive on. So yes, we're strong, but then to what degree? Like how did that hurt us? You know what I mean?
I was just about to say like where does that gotten?
No, yeah,
like, I grew up in the same sort of like mindset with the same sort of mindset, you know, like in the Mexicano culture, just suck it up. You don't talk politics at the dinner table. Don't talk about mental health because you being crazy is just, that's taboo. You don't do that. Don't say that. Don't say those things. And it's like, what has that gotten us? Because look at all the stuff I've gone through. Look at everything that I think that we all have gone through. And it's like to be able to not, I think human beings' threshold, at least for me personally speaking, my threshold for putting up with BS is limitless, but that's not my limit. I've allowed that to not. I've said to President that that's not going to be my limit anymore, because I could put up with worlds of it. I think anybody, a lot of people can. It's not my limit anymore.
15 years ago, I would have felt good if somebody was like, after sharing all the crap that's happened to me and that I've been through, wow, you're so strong. It would have made me feel like it wasn't in vain. Like, oh my gosh, look at how much I put up with. And now I'm like, oh, ew, look at everything you put up with. Exactly. Yeah. It's horrible, and I don't want that for my kids. And it's been really tough growing up that way and then trying to like provide that space for the kids. Like it hasn't been hard, like the desire is there, but it's been hard to like constantly keep myself on check. It's okay that it's okay that your 16-year-old is telling you that that's not okay, when you just want to be like, why are you even talking back to me right now? You know what I mean? So it's been a learning experience. Thankfully, they're not like horrible children that like turn around and like yell at me and, like we can have a conversation, but it has been challenging because of the way that I grew up. And then something else that I was having a conversation sort of related to this with a friend recently, and, because he's kind of like my age too. And he was saying a lot of people like crap on the youngsters and they say, oh, like they don't put up, they cry with everything, they break down. But he brought up that same point you just did, Paul, which was, first of all, they're constantly plugged into all this information coming through. Mm-hmm. And then he also brought up a good point, which I thought was really good, especially coming from a man and within our culture, my age, which was, yeah, but then who also raised them? Like if we have a problem with things that they're doing, we are the ones that are raising them. So we can make it better. But if we think they're being disrespectful, okay, we allow them to be disrespectful. Why? Because we said we grew up without this and now we're going to give them whatever they want. So that's on us. And I thought that was very, very important. Like we have to take a good look at us as parents, my generation, and be like, okay, yes, we should be giving more space. Yes, we should be letting them speak up. Yes, they have that right. But then how are we kind of guiding them, right? So they're not like little a-holes walking around and just disrespecting people. You know what I mean?
Do you want kids?
Do I want kids? No.
Don't blame you.
I love my nieces. I love my nephew. I'll get a cat maybe one of these days. A cat and a dog together.
I used to think that I would be a good parent, but I also just really enjoy, in the same way that I don't want a partner, I don't want kids. I'm good.
Like a solitude. Do I want to bring up a kid in this crazy world that might be ending in the next 20, 30 years?
Before, we didn't think we had an option. I remember being 19, guys, okay? 19. And somebody told me, ¿por qué no te has casado? Ya te vas a quedar para vestir santos. And I was like I was just 19. And I'm like, dude, I don't even know what I'm going to eat for dinner tonight. Like, but that's just kind of the mentality then. The minute you get married, ¿y cuándo vas a tener hijos? I always knew I wanted to have kids, but it's been very hard.
He's probably really good with kids too. I could totally see it.
Because he's so like relaxed and so authentic about who he is that like really kids pick up on that. And when you feel comfortable around them, when they're like, okay, But then I was always talking about him too to the kids. So they were already like, they kind of know a little bit about him.
Yeah. What time? I know.
I'm bad with kids. I talk to them as if they were like grown adults, and I expect them to understand what I'm saying.
No, same.
You should do that to them.
Like with my niece, but my niece was also very mature. Like even since she was a little girl, like it was really weird. Like I would remember thinking like before I'd be around them, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna have to like be like a little like, but like anytime I ever talked to her, I was like, what's up? Like what's going on? It was never, even when she was like a little girl, and she's just a very different little girl. I mean, she's 15 now, but she's crazy. So I think it's condescending to like talk to like a kid or any person like that. So it's like, even as a baby, it's like, what's up, baby? What's going on with you?
I think they appreciate that. I know my kids appreciate when somebody's like, even Pax. Pax is 4, and Pax really thinks he runs the world, and he thinks he's like on my level.
Hector, if you don't mind me asking, where do you see yourself in 10, 20 years? Do you think you'll ever come back to El Paso, or do you think you'll live like maybe different places and then always just come back to visit?
I can't wait to go back to El Paso. I don't think I ever really wanted to leave. I think it was just the circumstances in the moment. Yeah, I always say, like, I love my job now. My job is great. It's a little, obviously, as we mentioned, it's different from what I used to do at the border, but it's also just so much more, like different things that I never even imagined. I mean, not that I didn't imagine, I just didn't understand, because I work for a resettlement agency now. And resettlement agencies like have so many different responsibilities, not just to like, I mean, obviously we help asylum seekers too, but refugees are a different category. They're not, it's different from asylum seekers in a way, because they get resettled and there's a whole different process. And I've been exposed to just different communities of people seeking that sort of humanitarian protection.
Needs.
Yeah, exactly. Just different processes that exist in the country and stuff. And if I'm being honest, my compensation is significantly more than it was.
So where are we going?
So we're taking a jet plane where? No, I'm joking.
So where are we going again? My rent's getting paid for how many months?
So I always say I wish I had the job I had here, but in El Paso, because there's nothing like home. And I was just there very recently, and I can't wait to go back already. I'm already looking. I'll be there. I'll be back for sure. I think in the next 10, 20 years, I envision, and I really hope at some point to make this a reality. I've been thinking about it and figuring out ways to do it. I want to keep doing what I'm doing at the border, but I want it to be sustainable. I want it to be well-funded. And even for me, I want to figure out a way for me to, get compensated what I fucking deserve.
Yeah.
Or a nonprofit sort of thing.
Yeah, I would love to do there's an iteration of an LGBTQ asylum seeker project in El Paso right now. It's supported in part by my old employer, which is, actually I should be old because I'm a contractor with them now. So that's their contribution to that project in El Paso. But I would love to take more of the lead in developing that project and making it a durable sort of.
Anybody listening right now, what can they do if they wanted to get involved in making that happen, or any capacity that they can help right now? What would you like for people to take into consideration and do if they can?
I know, if people want to get involved in the movement and in the work, there's always a need for volunteers. We can definitely employ volunteers to do interviews, the initial interviews to gather data, or even if it's accompaniment. Sometimes we just need people to take people places, to medical appointments or to the airport or whatever else. I don't know that those contributions would directly help make that nonprofit project dream a reality. But my answer to that particular question would be more towards funders. Definitely community contributions and funding are great. And that's how Santa Fe Dreamers Project was able to sustain a lot of their work. And that's how we were able to even go to Mexico City, without even thinking twice about it, was because of the unrestricted nature of those private donations. But I think to make I don't know. I think there's room for people to contribute in that way. But I also think that there needs to be a larger sort of fundraising effort. That's what I'm sort of looking for, philanthropy and grants and those sorts of things to see about making that a reality. But, I only have so much capacity to make leeway on that. When I was working at Santa Fe Dreamers full time in El Paso, I always used to say this is my dream job. This is exactly what I want to be doing. I could see myself doing it for a very long time. Clearly, I couldn't leave it for very long because I'm doing it again, even if it's remote.
That would be cool, right? To see that happen, Paul.
I think, for sure, he has all the capacity. He has the experience. He has the desire and the passion.
The drive, the passion, yeah.
Yeah. And then just the things I know that Hector's done and everything, I'm telling you, some of the stories he's told me. Of course, he didn't go into specifics with names and everything, but just letting me know the certain sorts of things that people have gone through. He's already made a difference in the people's lives who have been his clients and the clients he's worked with. So I can only imagine what the limit really is. Sky's the limit for him.
Before I let you go, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding people have about you?
Oh gosh, it's funny because I think about this a lot. I think people perceive me. I don't know. I think people really judge anybody by how they look a lot of times. And I think it definitely applies to me. There was a point in my life when I realized that I think it was in law school because it was so isolating. And it was I started wondering, why don't people, am I that unapproachable? And I think I realized I look like an intimidating, unapproachable, big, brown, Mexican. I don't know how masculine I look, but I think I present pretty.
There's your answer.
And I think that's the biggest misconception. Sometimes I even experience dysphoria just because it's like I know that I'm in this very masculine, intimidating body that people see, but I'm not at all that person. Why am I in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I don't even identify like as I identify as non-binary. So
Okay.
I
Thank you for telling me.
I don't.
It's so weird when
mind
someone calls you, like, when
you-
someone says they're a man, I'm like, I'm not a man, I'm just me. Like, that's how I feel.
Exactly right. I'm not. I don't consider myself a man or masculine. Like I don't identify that way at all. It doesn't really am. So I think that would be it.
Yeah, well,
sure.
when I first saw your picture, I thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna be so serious. If I say something that he feels it's like because some people are just a little uptight. You can say something and they find it offensive, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I don't say anything that makes him feel like, who does she think she is? But no, you're not at all. Like from the moment you popped up, you were like so friendly and welcoming, and I was like, I was freaking out for no reason.
I'm telling you, the first time we met, he's literally saved me. Like, I would have just died. I would have just been laying on,
Till this
out on
day,
the
you would have been
floor.
there.
Just a skeleton.
So glad that you agreed to do this and that we can sort of, I don't know, like maybe the more people that hear about, how there are so many people doing the work that matters. Because like Paul on his end is doing work that not a lot of people are willing to do either, but it's work that matters for our community and in general, like community here in El Paso and community as like Hispanics, it's needed.
It helps to educate people. It helps just to let people know what's going on. I mean, obviously, there's so many different facets to what it is to be a human being. To be a human being in America, to be a human being in El Paso, to be from El Paso, and what that entails, and what to be on the border. Like, it's a completely unique experience that so few people know what it entails.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad to have joined you all this evening. Thanks so much for inviting me and taking the time to.
Thank you. Now, if people want to
thank you.
get in contact with your organization or for whatever reason, like how can they contact you? I don't know if you care that they can contact you or where you work. What would be the best place?
Anywhere, really. I mean, Facebook. And if you find me on social media, reach out. I don't know. In the work that we're doing in El Paso, I know that we need volunteers, and I think there's probably going to be an ask for people to do interviews and that sort of thing coming up. So
I already told Paul when he runs for something having to do in the city. I don't know what he's going to run for in the future, but I will make coffee. I'll be in the background making coffee. And I mean, if there's anything that I can do to help you, as well, and like whatever projects you do, then like I'm here for it too.
Totally. Yeah. Let me just, I got to get some ducks lined up or whatever the expression is.
Yeah. Let me just figure out where the heck I am. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that when this is published, I'll link something where people can reach out and like volunteer or maybe, keep in touch with what you're doing. And then if they're able to jump in at any point, like do that because this is important.
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And Paul, you too.
Good to see you.
And you're both are
Of
beautiful.
course.
I just had to say that.
Ay, tú también.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Paul.
My love. That's
He's so
cute. I like
sweet.
that. Yeah, she's awesome.
And he's
Really
so
is.
handsome too.
Girl, I'm telling you, the first time we met, me being naked, like, luckily I had a towel wrapped around me, but I was like fucking
And you're
horrible.
like
great, literally.
And he's gorgeous.
I'm crippled, fucking half naked. I mean, luckily I just showered, so at least I smelled fresh. But still, I was like, no, but yeah, he's awesome.